On May 22, 2019, photographer Nirmal Purja captured an image that changed how people saw Everest. 320 climbers queued at the Hillary Step, clipped to a single fixed rope, moving one at a time. The mountain looked less like a climb and more like a parking lot. One of those climbers was Don Cash, a 55-year-old attorney from Boulder. He'd spent years preparing, trained at altitude, committed tens of thousands of dollars. At the Hillary Step, he waited for hours in that line. He summited, then descended to Camp 4, exhausted and depleted. That night, in his tent, he collapsed. At altitude, oxygen is a countdown. A standard supply covers ascent and descent, nothing more. Cash had burned hours of it standing still in that queue. Oxygen meant for his way down. By the time he reached camp, that margin was gone. And this is not an isolated case. In 2023, 20 people died on Everest. No single catastrophe, no storm. The deaths spread across teams and routes, distributed through the entire season. They were the result of a system, the same system that created the queue. So, what changed? Before we break that down, if you're new here, subscribe. This channel looks at how systems like this actually work. To understand that, you have to go back to what the mountain was before any of this existed. Before the world called it Mount Everest, the mountain already had names. In Tibetan, Chomolungma, goddess mother of the world. In Nepali, Sagarmatha, forehead of the sky. These names did not describe geology. They described a presence that demanded reverence, not conquest. That changed in 1865, when British surveyors assigned the name Mount Everest after a man who never saw it. The reframing was complete. The mountain shifted from a sacred destination to a measured object waiting to be climbed. By the time of the first confirmed ascent on May 29, 1953, both interpretations still coexisted, but not equally. Tenzing Norgay reached the summit alongside Edmund Hillary, yet what he did there reflected the older understanding. Norgay performed a puja ceremony, leaving offerings in the snow, small items such as food and personal objects, as a gesture of respect to the deity believed to inhabit the peak. Hillary took the photograph that would become the defining image of the ascent. There is no corresponding photograph of Hillary at the summit, not because of intention, but because Norgay had never been taught how to use a camera. As a result, the image that came to represent the first successful climb shows Norgay alone, standing at the top of a mountain that, in his cultural framework, was not meant to be conquered. That image captures a transitional moment. It preserves, almost accidentally, a version of Everest that still carried its earlier meaning, one in which reaching the summit was not a claim of ownership, but an act of visitation. That version did not last. By the early 1990s, the shift was no longer subtle. Commercial expeditions were beginning to redefine access to the mountain, and with that change came a different set of incentives and expectations. Edmund Hillary, who had once stood at the summit himself, described it plainly. It is becoming so that you can go to the beach for your holiday or climb Everest. He said this at the moment that the model was taking shape. He recognized what was happening, but by then, the direction had already been set. Two guides from New Zealand named Rob Hall and Gary Ball looked at what had happened to mountaineering and saw an opportunity. In 1992, they guided 6 paying clients to the summit of Everest. 6 people who were not professional mountaineers. 6 people who had simply decided they wanted to stand on top of the world and had the money to make it happen. At that moment in history, only a few hundred people had ever summited Everest total. Each of those summits represented the end of a career. Years of climbing in the Alps, the Himalayas, the Andes. Technical mastery earned through decades. Everest was what you attempted after a lifetime of preparation. Then Hall and Ball showed that it didn't have to be. They fixed the ropes on technical sections so clients didn't have to. They maintained oxygen supplies and managed the flow. They hired Sherpas at a 1-to-1 ratio with clients, meaning dedicated support for each person. They brought expedition chefs so people could eat well at extreme altitude. The formula was radical in its simplicity. Remove the variables that killed mountaineers, then sell the simplified version to people who had the money and the desire, but not the decades of experience. It worked. All 6 summited. All 6 returned alive. Adventure Consultants was born. The commercial era had begun. In 1996, a massive storm struck. 8 people died, including both of the industry's most prominent operators, Rob Hall and Scott Fisher. This should have ended commercial Everest guiding. Instead, the disaster became its greatest marketing tool. John Krakauer was there. He wrote Into Thin Air, documenting exactly how commercial guiding kills people. The book sold 10 million copies. The book that warned millions against commercial Everest became the industry's primary recruitment brochure. Tragedy amplified demand. By 2023, the consequences of that choice were visible. Nepal issued 478 permits in a single season. With support Sherpas and porters, more than 1,200 people were on the mountain at once. The demographic shift was complete and undeniable. The early commercial clients were extraordinary athletes, business executives who had spent decades climbing. By 2023, the market had expanded to include people whose primary qualification was the ability to pay. These were fit, determined people, often successful in their own fields, but they were not mountaineers. An experienced Sherpa put it plainly. The climbing pattern has changed. It used to be hardened climbers, but now it is a lot of novice climbers who want to get to the summit of Everest. This is not a judgment about who deserves to climb Everest. It is a logistical fact with physiological consequences. The human body above 8,000 meters makes specific demands on the support system. The budget operators would respond to this demand by reducing support rather than increasing it, and that choice would kill people at a scale nobody anticipated. Above 8,000 meters, the human body is operating in a state of active failure. The air contains roughly 1/3 the oxygen available at sea level. No amount of training fixes this. Your body is literally dying, consuming its own tissue for energy. Your brain is receiving maybe half the oxygen it needs to function normally. Hypoxia creates a specific kind of lie. The physiological collapse, the deteriorating judgment, the distorted perception feels like calm. You feel fine. You're not fine. You're in the most dangerous state a human can occupy, and you feel serene about it. This is where oxygen becomes a countdown. A standard Everest climber carries 3 to 5 supplemental oxygen cylinders. That's survival equipment. The oxygen has to do 3 things: get you from Camp 4 to the summit, keep you alive at the summit, last for the entire descent back down. The descent is longer than the ascent, harder. You're exhausted. The oxygen burn rate is the same or higher. Climbers calculate this precisely. Duration multiplied by consumption rate equals total oxygen available. If you're on schedule, the math works. The oxygen lasts. You summit and descend safely. If you're not on schedule, if something delays you, the equation breaks. Any delay consumes oxygen that was supposed to be available for descent. If you're standing in a queue at 8,790 meters, your body burns oxygen standing still, exactly as it burns oxygen climbing. A 2-hour delay consumes 2 full hours of oxygen. That oxygen was calculated for descent. It's gone. The queue became lethal. Waiting in line at 8,790 meters does not reduce oxygen demand. Your body burns oxygen standing still, exactly as it burns oxygen climbing. A 2-hour delay at the Hillary step, just standing there, waiting for your turn to move up that final vertical wall, consumes approximately 2 full hours of oxygen. That oxygen was calculated to be available for descent. It's gone, used up. The queue consumed it. Don Cash summited on the oxygen he had available, but some of that oxygen was spent waiting. His oxygen ran low on the descent. He made it back to Camp 4 that night, collapsed in his tent, and died. The arithmetic had caught up to him. Frostbite operates on the same brutal countdown, time and temperature. Every minute exposed to sub-zero air at extreme altitude adds damage. In 2023, the mountain was colder than usual, minus 40 degrees Celsius at Camp 4 when it should have been minus 28. The queues added hours to already cold conditions. Frostbite that would have been preventable during a direct summit became irreversible during an extended wait in line. The physical constraint that enables all of this is simple: one fixed rope. From Camp 4 to the summit, there is a single rope. Climbers going up and climbers coming down share that same line. When 478 permits mean 200 teams are all trying to summit during the same weather window, ascending and descending traffic collide. The Hillary step, that 12-meter vertical wall, becomes a single-file bottleneck where nothing moves except one person at a time. Most people standing in that queue aren't mountaineers. They're executives, athletes, professionals who've been told they can summit Everest with training, oxygen, and Sherpa support. They've paid tens of thousands of dollars. They believe they're being guided safely. Standing at 8,790 meters, with judgment already corrupted by hypoxia, they can't assess whether the delay has pushed their oxygen into danger. The information required for that life or death decision is unavailable. They lack technical knowledge. Their guide company's incentive is to keep moving toward the summit, not to turn back. So, they wait. The oxygen burns, the math tightens, and nobody knows until it's too late. Here's the statistic that changes everything. In 2023 and 2024, 23 of 26 Everest fatalities occurred on expeditions charging at or below the median price. Not most of them, not a majority. 23 of 26. This isn't correlation. This is a pattern so consistent it becomes prediction. Alan Arnett, who tracks the Himalayan database, dug into a decade of deaths. Between 2011 and 2017, 12 of 17 climber deaths on the South Col route were clients of budget operators. A year later, someone would report that every single client death on Everest in 2022 went with low-budget, less experienced outfitters. The numbers keep saying the same thing. When someone dies on Everest, they're statistically more likely to have been guided by the cheapest option available. This matters because it tells you where to look, not at the mountain, at the business model. Budget operators reduce costs in 3 lethal areas. Support. 1 Sherpa managing 4 clients instead of dedicated one-to-one assistance, with inexperienced guides promoted to lead roles to cut salary costs. Oxygen. Fewer bottles at Camp 4, lower flow rates, no real-time monitoring of consumption, no descent reserves. Experience. No formal turnaround protocols when things go wrong at altitude, minimum insurance coverage. Individually, each cut looks marginal. Spread across an expedition cost, they add up to undersell the competition. Combined, they create a specific failure mode. A client who develops problems in the death zone has fewer resources responding, less experienced support making decisions, and less oxygen than a client at a premium operator. This is where someone actually has to say the unsayable part. Guy Cotter, who runs Adventure Consultants and has been guiding Everest since the 1990s, put it after the 2023 season. People go shopping for an expedition on the internet and get themselves a bargain. They only discover the difference when it's too late. Think about that phrasing. You can't know. At the moment you book, you can't know that the guide assigned to you is on his second Everest. You can't know the oxygen math leaves no margin for a 2-hour queue. You can't know there's no rescue protocol if you become incapacitated above Camp 4. You discover it at 8,700 meters, hypoxic and confused when your oxygen runs low and your guide doesn't know what to do. Aliye Saik Ali, another senior guide, was more direct. Some companies are killing their clients. By Western standards, they would be tried criminally for negligence. This is an exaggeration. It's the causal chain laid bare. Operator cuts corners to undercut on price. Clients buy the cheaper option without knowing what's been cut. Client develops problems in the death zone. Client dies. Nepal attributes it to weather or bad luck. Operator continues operating next season. Different country, different client, same price, same corners cut, same outcome. The system reproduces itself. The premium operators, Alpine Ascents, Adventure Consultants, Alpenglow, have in effect solved this. They maintain proper ratios, proper oxygen, experienced guides. Their client mortality rates show it. But you can't universalize that model without eliminating the budget market entirely. And the budget market is where the deaths concentrate, and where Nepal's entire revenue structure depends on volume. There's a number that explains why nothing changes, no matter how many bodies arrive at base camp each season. In 2023, Nepal collected $5.8 million from Everest permits alone, 478 foreign climbers times $11,000 per permit. To understand why that matters, you need to know that Nepal's per capita income is about $1,300 per year. The entire mountaineering permit revenue, $5.92 million in 2024, makes up a significant chunk of the tourism sector's contribution to the national economy. Everest isn't just a mountain, it's infrastructure, jobs, Sherpas, porters, guest house owners, equipment suppliers, pilots, medical staff. Tens of thousands of livelihoods depend on people continuing to pay to climb it. This creates a specific problem that nobody talks about directly. Nepal's Department of Tourism collects the permit money. The same department writes the rules about permits. The same ministry that profits from issuing 478 permits also decides whether to issue 478 permits. When Nepal's head of tourism said after 2023 that the record death toll was caused by climate change, not overcrowding, that statement protected something very specific: the permit revenue model. Climate change is external. Nobody can blame a government for weather. Overcrowding is a choice with consequences that reduce money. So, reforms that would actually work become impossible. A hard cap on permits, say 300 climbers per season, would directly reduce the queue problem. Fewer people means shorter lines at the Hillary step. Shorter lines mean less oxygen consumed waiting. The deaths linked to traffic jam exposure would drop measurably. But a hard cap also means Nepal rejects paying customers. It means 35% less permit revenue. The government would need to raise the permit fee dramatically just to break even. Experience requirements work the same way. In the mid-1990s, Nepal briefly required climbers to have summited a 6,000-meter peak before attempting Everest. Permit applications dropped. The expedition operators complained. Foreign climbers who believed the mountain should be open to anyone with money objected. The rule got reversed. It came back in 2025 in modified form, now requiring a 7,000-meter summit. But enforcement is weak, and operators aren't required to verify the climbs their clients claim. Expensive guide certification would eliminate the practice of promoting second-season Sherpas into lead guide roles. It would cost money. It would raise operator costs and shrink the pool of competitors who can afford entry. The budget operators would not survive it. But eliminating budget operators is eliminating Nepal's revenue. So the rule doesn't get written, and when it does, it gets written with no teeth. The permit fee went up from $11,000 to $15,000 in 2025. A $4,000 increase spread across all expedition costs still allows budget operators to undercut premium competitors. The fee is designed to appear reformist without disrupting the market that generates the revenue. The real solution is mathematically simple. Reduce permits by 40%, but raise the fee to $25,000, keeping total revenue stable while eliminating crowding. Alan Arnett and others have published this calculation. It works on paper. It fails in politics. The expedition operator lobby resists any constraint on client numbers. The government stays trapped between safety and revenue, not indifferent to the deaths, trapped. And the easiest available narrative, climate change caused it, protects the permit income entirely. Tenzing Norgay stood at the summit on May 29, 1953, and performed a ritual for a goddess. He buried cookies and chocolate and a pencil in the snow as offerings to Myolang Sangma. This was a visitation, not a conquest. This was the last moment the mountain was understood that way in the public record. 70 years later, in 2023, 20 people died on that same mountain. Not from avalanches, not from a single storm, from the ordinary operation of a commercial system designed to extract maximum value from the climb. The goddess mother of the world had become a credential, a talking point, a sentence in a keynote speech. The summit was something you purchased and then displayed. The question that remains is whether transformation, once complete, can be undone, whether Chomolungma can ever be anything other than Everest again. Subscribe for more forensic breakdowns of what happens when money meets mountains and gravity keeps its own accounting.